Money Stories is a Chasing Fi series that dissects common myths about money. I did not receive a good financial education, so I'm making up for lost time by analyzing what went wrong and how I can move forward in a productive manner. My financial journey isn't perfect, and I've made mistakes, but I don't live in the past. I'm learning new things every day and sharing them with others in hopes that my mistakes will help anyone who watches avoid the same missteps. Today, we're going to talk about some of the ideas I had about debt before I started my financial journey, and we'll end with the vital lessons I've learned and how they're improving my life. So here's my money story about debt. Growing up, I was encouraged to save money and avoid debt. Once I was an adult, I paid my bills and saved my money, but for some reason, I couldn't get ahead financially. I'd cut costs and save the difference, but still, I was having a tough time staying on top of my finances. As I made more money, things improved, and after I got married, the two-income household made things easier. But we still weren't getting ahead. Saving was no problem. We both are savers, so we put our money in savings accounts and certificate of deposits. There was almost no gain in the savings accounts, and a very teeny gain in the certificate of deposit account. What we weren't taking into account was that each day our dollars were in savings accounts or certificate of deposit accounts, they were losing money because of inflation. This is a lesson that can be hard to learn if you grew up with parents who remember the days when interest rates were high and putting your money in a savings account will result in a decent return. It's important to recognize that things have changed, and savings accounts are not the way to move your finances forward. All debt is bad is the story I told myself for a long time. Financial risks are not worth it, is what I learned. But this ignores the fact that the United States economy runs on debt. This month, my husband and I went to make our last payment on our mortgage, and just before we pulled the trigger, we realized that if we wanted to take out additional mortgages for rental properties, we needed to have some healthy, open accounts that showed how we paid off debt. Until this year, we had 3 credit cards between the two of us. No car payments or anything like that, just the mortgage and my student loan. Both of these debts show our capacity to make payments on time and that we can be trusted with debt. When we applied for both a cash out refi and a pre-approval for a mortgage on a rental property, we were eligible to take out both at the same time. Why? Because our debt to income ratio is low. What if we didn't have any debt? What if we had made that final payment on the mortgage? Would that have looked strange to the lender? Healthy revolving accounts are useful. They show how responsible you are when it comes to debt. And if you're managing your credit well, you can use the debt as leverage. The more we thought about it, the less it made sense to make that final mortgage payment. What if we took our time to pay off the remainder of our mortgage? Would that be the best move? We decided it was. Instead of making that final payment, we are stringing out the last of our mortgage over the next few months. In the meantime, our goal is to pick up 4 rental properties. In order to do that, lenders want to see that we have 6 months of reserved money in our account. So in order to take on more debt, we have to properly balance the debt we currently have. But eliminating all debt is not necessarily ideal. This is a hard lesson for me because I have always been taught that debt should be avoided at all costs. But the more I understand about debt, the more I recognize how it can be used to better our lives. For example, we can leverage the equity in our home, but if we're planning to do that, there's no reason to pay off the balance to zero. So we're allowing a bit of that balance to remain, and we'll take our time paying it off while we acquire rental properties. No conversation in my life about debt would be complete without discussing student loans. Student loan debt is something that has become quite a hot topic over the past few years. It is something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand if they aren't dealing with these student loan lenders and things of the such, but I I'm not going to go down that route. Instead, I want to talk about the student loan debt and why it has become not so great for me. My parents would have paid for college if I'd gone when they wanted me to. But as a headstrong 18-year-old, I went for one term and dropped out. I got a job at Red Lobster and spent my days hanging out with friends who weren't exactly on the fast track to success. In time, I saved up about $1,000 in my savings account and I didn't have any debt. I was very proud of myself. I was very careful to not take on debt. I didn't want a credit card. I had cash. That's all I needed. Well, a few years later, I returned to college on my own accord. At that time, college degrees were all the rage, and the idea that any debt incurred while getting a college degree would be worth it was the prevailing idea at the time. So I took out student loans. When I graduated into the depressed Michigan economy, I decided to go to graduate school because the more degrees you have, the better, right? Actually, that may have still been true in parts of the country at that time, but in Michigan it wasn't. The student loan debt I took out for school wasn't really the problem. The real issue was that I stayed in a place where I couldn't get a job to pay off the debt. This is a key lesson. Staying where one doesn't belong, even though it will hinder one's financial situation, is not a good decision. If I'd moved to another state right after graduation, I doubt student loan debt would have been a problem for me. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because I just was able to secure the exact type of job I wanted when I graduated from graduate school the first time I applied in Utah. In Michigan, I applied for the same type of job over and over again, constantly for years, and was not even able to get an interview. The market was flooded there. So if I had left Michigan after I finished graduate school, or even after an undergrad studies were done, I would have had a different financial story. I would have been able to get a different type of job. I'm sure of that. So it's not that my student loan debt is so bad or that taking out the student loans was a bad idea. The bad idea was more of me staying in a place that was economically depressed. So that brings me to the most important lesson I've learned about debt. Debt is not inherently good or bad. It's what you do with it that makes it a burden or a blessing. My money story around debt has changed, and now I see it in a different light. I understand that debt drives our financial systems, and while it needs to be carefully managed, the idea of being completely 100% debt-free isn't the best road to take to financial freedom. Instead, we must learn to use the debt to make us more money, and that is how we will get ahead. So that's my debt story to this point. It's evolved in the past year, and I'm sure it will continue to change. I look forward to learning more about debt and finding new and innovative ways to use it to improve my life. So what's your story about debt? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.